A simple reading turned into chaos when my husband's family realized I inherited everything. His mother screamed, "You'll hand over that money to my son." I stood up and said, "Funny, I was just about to announce my divorce." My lawyer slid the papers across the table, and my husband's face went white. I never thought my life would turn into something straight out of a soap opera, but here we are. My husband, let's call him Mark, came from money. Old money. The kind of money that had been passed down for generations, making sure his family never had to struggle a day in their lives. His mother, Victoria, was the definition of entitled. She had this way of looking at people like they were beneath her, especially me. She made it clear from the beginning that she didn't think I was worthy of her son. But Mark loved me, or so I thought. So I put up with her snide comments, her backhanded compliments, her passive-aggressive digs at my modest upbringing. I should have seen the signs. I should have known that this family was rotten from the inside out. But I didn't. Not until Mark's father, Richard, died. And everything fell apart. Richard had always been polite to me. Not warm, but polite. He wasn't the type to involve himself in family drama, but he also wasn't blind. He knew how his wife treated me. He knew how spoiled his sons were. And maybe that's why he did what he did. We all gathered in the lawyer's office, a grand room with dark wood furniture and bookshelves that reached the ceiling. Victoria was sitting at the head of the table, acting like a queen. Mark sat beside her, tapping his fingers against the polished wood. His two brothers, Daniel and Greg, were on the other side, looking smug, like they already knew what was coming. I was at the far end. No one looked at me. The lawyer, an older man with glasses perched on the end of his nose, cleared his throat and began reading the will. Victoria got a property in Connecticut and a generous sum of money. She nodded, as if it was expected. Daniel and Greg each got investment properties and a sizable inheritance. They smirked, nudging each other under the table. Then, the lawyer got to the main part, the bulk of Richard's estate. Everyone sat up a little straighter. Mark's hands stilled on the table. Victoria's lips curled into a small smile. And then the lawyer said my name. The room went silent. I stared at him, thinking I had misheard. He continued reading. Richard had left everything to me. Not just a house, not just a sum of money, everything. The family estate, the stock portfolio, the classic car collection, the businesses. It was all mine. Victoria's chair scraped against the floor as she stood up so fast it toppled over. "You'll hand over that money to my son," she shrieked. Her voice was sharp, filled with disbelief. "That is Mark's inheritance. You cannot be serious." Mark turned to me, his face pale, his mouth slightly open, as if he was trying to form words, but couldn't. Greg muttered, "This has to be a mistake." Daniel leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the lawyer. "Read that again." The lawyer, unfazed, adjusted his glasses and repeated it. Richard had left everything to me. Not to his sons. Not to his wife. To me. Victoria looked like she was about to have a stroke. "This is fraud. It has to be." Mark finally found his voice. Why would he do this?" He turned to me. "What did you say to him?" I let out a small laugh. "Me? Oh no, Mark. This wasn't me. This was your father's decision." Victoria's hands slammed onto the table. No. This isn't happening. You're not taking what belongs to my son." And that's when I stood up. I smoothed out my jacket, tucked my hair behind my ear, and looked directly at Mark. "Funny," I said. "I was just about to announce my divorce." Mark blinked. "What?" The room shifted. The weight of what I had just said sank in. My lawyer, who had been sitting beside me quietly this entire time, reached into his briefcase, pulled out a set of papers, and slid them across the table. Mark's face drained of all color. "What is this?" he asked, though he already knew. His voice cracked. I didn't sit back down. I didn't need to. I just stared at him and said, "It's over." I knew. I had known for months. Mark had been cheating on me for a long time. And I mean a long time. At first, I brushed off the signs. The late nights at work. The sudden need for privacy with his phone. The way he had started treating me like I was an inconvenience rather than his wife. But then, a friend saw him. At a restaurant. With her. A blonde woman, younger than me. Laughing, touching his arm, looking at him the way I used to. Her name was Tiffany. I hired a private investigator, and within 1 week, I had everything I needed. Mark had a whole second life. A second apartment. A second woman. And the worst part? Victoria knew. She had met Tiffany. Had dinner with her. Had even helped her plan a wedding. My stomach turned when I saw the photos. Tiffany, sitting across from Victoria at a high-end restaurant, flashing a diamond ring. My money had paid for that ring. And I had proof. Emails. Texts. Photos. Bank statements. I had all of it. So I had waited. Waited for the will to be read. waited for the perfect moment. And now, as Mark sat there, staring at the divorce papers like they might set him on fire, I smiled. Because I wasn't just leaving him. I was taking everything. Mark's hands clenched into fists. His face was red now, the shock giving way to rage. This isn't real, he muttered, shaking his head. You can't do this. Victoria pointed a manicured finger at me. You think you can steal from this family? You think you can take what isn't yours? I tilted my head. According to the law, it is mine. Greg leaned back in his chair, watching the scene unfold like it was a reality show. Daniel looked like he was debating whether to intervene or let the chaos happen. Mark's voice grew desperate. We can fix this. I let out a small laugh. Fix this? I echoed. Mark, you were planning a wedding while still married to me. His mouth snapped shut. Victoria was practically foaming at the mouth. You will hand over that money to my son, or I cut her off. Or what? She had nothing. She knew it. Mark looked at me, and I swear, for the first time, he understood. I wasn't just leaving. I was leaving with everything. Mark's hands hovered over the divorce papers. He didn't touch them. He just stared at them like they were some kind of bomb about to go off. His mother, Victoria, was still seething. You can't do this, she's fat. You think you can walk in here and take what doesn't belong to you? I leaned against the chair, arms crossed. Your husband thought otherwise. Mark's brothers, Greg and Daniel, were eerily silent. They had been cocky before, expecting a big payout. Now they were both watching like this was some sort of sick entertainment. Victoria's face twisted with rage. You manipulative little. The lawyer, who had been silent since dropping the will like a grenade, cleared his throat. Mrs. Lancaster, I can assure you that Mr. Richard Lancaster made these decisions entirely of his own free will. Mark finally found his voice. There's no way my father would do this, he muttered, shaking his head. He wouldn't leave me with nothing. Victoria turned on the lawyer. You knew about this, didn't you? The lawyer adjusted his glasses. Of course. Mr. Lancaster made the changes months before his passing. Months. My lips curled. Because I knew exactly why Richard had changed his will. I didn't have to be the one to tell him about Mark's double life. Richard figured it out on his own. He had called me into his study one afternoon, a few months before he died. It was rare for him to reach out to me directly, so I knew it was serious. I walked in, expecting him to talk about some event or family gathering. Instead, he slid an envelope across the desk. Inside were photos. Mark and Tiffany. Mark at a jewelry store. Mark wiring thousands of dollars to an account I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I flipped through them. Richard sighed, watching me carefully. I had a feeling for a while, he admitted. My son is a fool. I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing, my throat closing up. Richard leaned back in his chair. You ever wonder why I never let Victoria manage the finances? Or why I never gave Mark full access to his trust? I looked up at him, confused. He chuckled bitterly. Because I knew. I always knew. My wife is greedy. My sons are entitled. I had hoped Mark would be different, but he's just like the rest of them. I gripped the envelope tighter. Why are you showing me this? Richard's expression darkened. Because I'm making changes. And he did. He called his lawyer that day. I never asked him to leave me everything. But he did it anyway. Because, in his words, I was the only person in the family who wasn't rotten. Mark looked like he was going to pass out. His hands clenched the divorce papers, but he still didn't sign them. Victoria turned back to me, her face twisted in hatred. You don't deserve a penny of my husband's money. I exhaled slowly. Well, Victoria, the good news is you don't have to worry about your husband's money anymore. I smiled. Because it's mine. Mark shot up from his seat, chair screeching against the floor. His whole body was trembling. This isn't over. I tilted my head. Oh! He swallowed hard, looking at his lawyer. There has to be some way to fight this. His lawyer, a man who looked exhausted by association, sighed. You signed a prenup. You have no claim to her assets. Mark's jaw locked. Victoria scoffed. You're a Lancaster. You don't just let some woman take what's rightfully yours. The lawyer cut in. It wasn't rightfully his. It was rightfully Richard's. And Richard made his choice. The room was so quiet I could hear Mark's breathing. I reached for my pen. Well, since we're all here, Mark, go ahead and sign. I tapped the papers in front of him. Make it official. Mark was shaking. I'm not signing a damn thing. Victoria clutched his arm. Don't you dare. Greg and Daniel were still watching in silence. Then Greg, who had been oddly quiet, leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. You know, he said, voice casual. There might be one way to fight this. I glanced at him. Oh, please, enlighten us. Greg smirked. If you were caught cheating, the prenup could be challenged. My lips parted slightly before curling into a slow grin. That's funny. Greg frowned. What? I reached into my purse, pulled out my own folder, and tossed it onto the table. Greg grabbed it, flipped it open, then his eyes went wide. Inside? Proof that Mark had been cheating. For years. Bank statements. Photos. Hotel receipts. Emails. A full, neatly organized dossier detailing every disgusting lie. I tapped my nails against the table. Let me be clear. I have all the evidence. If anyone tries to pull that she was unfaithful argument, I will personally drag Mark's dirty laundry through the courts. Greg swallowed. Daniel shifted in his seat. Victoria's nails dug into her palms. Mark was still standing, eyes darting across the table, looking for a way out. There wasn't one. I leaned back in my chair, satisfied. So, are we done here? Mark didn't answer. Because, for the first time in his spoiled, privileged life, he had lost. And he knew it. I was gathering my things when the lawyer cleared his throat again. Actually, he said, glancing at me, there's one more thing. I raised an eyebrow. He pulled out another envelope. Mr. Lancaster left behind a personal letter. Addressed to you. Victoria's head snapped up. What? I reached for it, and my heart pounded as I unfolded the paper. It was Richard's handwriting. But as I read, my stomach dropped. Because Richard hadn't just left me everything. He had left behind a warning. A warning about Victoria. About Mark. About what they were capable of. And at the very bottom, one line stood out. Be careful. They will try to take it from you. My fingers tightened around the letter. Because Richard had been right about everything. And I had a sinking feeling this fight was far from over. The letter in my hands felt heavier than paper had any right to be. Richard's words echoed in my head. Be careful. They will try to take it from you. The air in the lawyer's office was thick with tension. Victoria's sharp gaze locked onto the envelope like she could burn it just by glaring. Mark was still standing frozen, his face pale. Greg and Daniel leaned forward, sensing that something was about to go down. And it did. Because Mark, in his absolute stupidity, made the worst decision of his life. He lunged for the letter. I pulled it back just in time, stepping away from the table. Give me that, he hissed, eyes wild. Victoria was already moving. It's a forgery. Richard wouldn't say that. The lawyer sighed, clearly exhausted. It's real. Mr. Lancaster gave it to me personally before his passing. If you need verification, I have. I don't need verification, I cut in, staring directly at Victoria. I believe him. Victoria's face turned an ugly shade of red. You little, I held up a hand. Careful now. Insulting me won't change the fact that your husband didn't trust you. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but her eyes screamed pure hatred. Greg chuckled under his breath. So, what does it say? I took a deep breath and read the most important part aloud. Victoria will never stop. She will manipulate, lie, and destroy to get what she wants. Mark is weak. He will let her do it. Be ready. Silence. Mark swallowed hard. That's not true. I scoffed. Really? Because you just tried to grab it out of my hands like a thief. Victoria recovered quickly. Richard was confused. He wasn't thinking straight when he wrote that. The lawyer shook his head. Mr. Lancaster had all his mental faculties when he made these changes. He was clear, rational, and fully aware of what he was doing. Her mouth opened, then closed, because there was nothing she could say. Mark, however, still wasn't done embarrassing himself. He slammed his fists on the table. This is damn. His voice cracked. My father wouldn't do this to me. To us. Mark. My voice was eerily calm. Your father knew about Tiffany. He knew about the secret apartment. He knew about the wedding you were planning behind my back. Mark flinched. Victoria shot him a sharp look. Wedding? Oh! She didn't know about that part. I turned to her with a smirk. You didn't think your son was just cheating, did you? I let out a humorless laugh. No. He was planning a whole new life. Without me. Victoria blinked. Her breathing was uneven now. Mark? Mark's hands curled into fists. He didn't answer. I pressed on. He bought her a ring. He picked a venue. He told her he would be free soon. I tilted my head. And you, Victoria, were helping him. Victoria turned back to her son, eyes narrowing. What is she talking about? Her voice was sharp, demanding. Mark refused to meet her gaze. Her nostrils flared. You told me the wedding planning was for a business associate. The tension in the room snapped. Greg let out a low whistle. Daniel muttered, damn. Victoria's hands clenched. Her jaw twitched. Mark took a step back. Mom, she slapped him. Hard. The sound echoed in the office. Mark stumbled, holding his cheek. His eyes were wide, shocked. Victoria's breathing was ragged. I did all this for you. I protected you. I covered for you. And you lied to me? Mark, ever the idiot, tried to defend himself. I just Tiffany was, Victoria's voice turned cold. You humiliated me. Her gaze flicked to me, and for the first time in years, there was something new in her eyes. Defeat. Because she had lost. She had spent years treating me like I was worthless. Like I wasn't good enough. And now? Now I had everything. And she had nothing. Mark's shoulders slumped. His whole body sagged, as if the reality of the situation had finally crashed over him. Victoria didn't even look at him anymore. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and walked out. Just like that. Greg stood up, stretching like he had just watched a good movie. Well, that was fun. Daniel shook his head. You're a psycho, man. Greg grinned. And you love it. They left together, whispering to each other. Probably about how insane this whole thing was. The lawyer cleared his throat. Ms. Lancaster, if you'd like to finalize the estate transfer, yes. I exhaled. Let's do that. Mark was still standing there, staring at the divorce papers. His cheek was red from where his mother had slapped him. He finally looked at me, eyes empty. You really hate me, don't you? His voice was quiet. I studied him, the man I had spent years loving, the man I had once trusted. And I felt nothing. No, I said simply. I don't hate you, Mark. I grabbed my pen, clicked it, and signed the last page of our divorce papers. I just don't care anymore. And then, I walked away. Victoria stopped contacting me after that day. I'm sure she's somewhere, plotting, but it doesn't matter. She has no power over me anymore. Mark tried reaching out. He sent emails. Called from different numbers. Apologized. I never answered. Because he wasn't sorry for what he did. He was just sorry that he lost. As for me, I packed my bags. I moved to Paris. I started over. And for the first time in years, I'm free.